Good morning. If you don't already have your copy of Sexing the Body out, or if you haven't read the first chapter, you might want to go ahead and do that. Get the book out and read the first chapter before you listen to this lecture, because I'm going to dive right into the first chapter. It was chock full of terminology and concepts that you may or may not be familiar with, and so not having any idea where you stand on the issues or how much information you've gathered in previous WGS classes or history classes or sociology classes, I'm going to go back over some of that terminology and some of the larger concepts and some of the larger philosophical ideas that pervade this first chapter, and that you sort of have to know in order to glean an understanding of the book as a whole. So at the end of this lecture, which might be 2 or 3 parts depending on how long I ramble, but at the end of the lecture I hope to give you a list of themes, and you're more than welcome to choose one of my themes. They're really broad, and so you can take, you should, once you get the theme, take a more specific route toward that theme and not just stay very broad. But I'll talk about that a little bit more later. I'll give you about 10 different themes that I've come up with that you might explore throughout the semester, and we can also negotiate other themes if yours doesn't fall under one of mine. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right in. I've been thinking the whole time, where do you even start talking about this book? Because it is, the first chapter alone seems to span from the dawn of time until the present day, and then even looks toward the future. Geographically, it goes there, it transcends all boundaries, even talking about hypothetical people and people who grow up on deserted islands without any sort of socializing. So you've got everything from the real to the imaginary, everything from prehistoric times till the future. And so I kept thinking to myself, how do you simplify this? How do you make this into something that anybody can understand upon walking in? And then I realized that I'm guilty of the exact same thing that she's accusing science and history and sociology and all of the disciplines of doing, and that is to make it too simple, to oversimplify. So I wrote on my wrist, you probably can't see it, even if I get in the camera, but it says, keep it simple, stupid, right? And so I wanted to kind of start with that idea of simplicity, of simplification, of oversimplification, and of this model that we've presented for ourselves as Westerners, as Americans, as academics even, to keep it simple, stupid, right? It seems to be our goal all the time, even in, let's think about my discipline, academic writing. So one of the things that I do when I try to assess whether or not my students have read is I ask them to give me a summary. And what is a summary if not an oversimplified version of the real thing, right? And you can see this in evidence all throughout academia. It's not just in writing, but everyone wants to sort of make things simple. When you take a test, you're trying to boil all of that material down into the simplest model possible. And so it seems to be a natural a natural human instinct to simplify things. So let's start with that idea of keeping things very simple, and that's how she begins her first chapter, Dueling Dualisms. So male or female, she starts out, right? And that's just about as simple as you can possibly make it. We recognize that not everyone falls into those two very distinct categories, but rather than complicate that for the masses, we just keep it into male and female so that most people, most of the time, can understand very simply, very quickly what we're talking about. And that is the tendency, that is what happens when the tendency to keep things simple, stupid, runs amok, and you get an entire society of people who are just like, just give me the bare facts, the bottom line. Give me an either or. And so that's two ways I was going to start this lecture, was keep it simple, stupid, and then the concept of either or. Americans, Westerners, humans, we like to think that we like choice. We like to think that we like unlimited choice, but studies have actually shown that humans perform better and are happier when we have limited choices, maybe between 6, 7, 8 things rather than a million things or whatever. When you get this into a huge group, the desire to have 6 or 7 choices keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller until we have only 2 or maybe 3 choices. So let's just take one of the most common things that you can see in today's society, the political system. When it gets near an election, or even when it's not near an election, even if whatever we talk about, if it's religion, if it's how we should eat, if it's what we should do with our money, everybody seems to fall in one of 2 camps. They'll say that they're a Democrat, they'll say that they're Republican, they'll say that they're liberal, they'll say that they're conservative. And we all know that it's never that simple, that people can never actually fall into that simplistic of a category, otherwise they become caricatures or stereotypes or icons or even avatars of themselves. They're not really them, they're some sort of group that they pre-fit themselves into. So we really aren't an either-or type society, but when we get into large groups, that's the push. So keeping it simple, having it either or, that kind of gets at this idea of dueling dualisms that she brings up in the first chapter. On page 3, she actually says in that first full paragraph, there is no either or, rather there are shades of difference. And so one kind of binary or dualism that I want to bring out as we go through this book is the way that people think in one of two ways. And I know that I'm, again, guilty of creating a dualism where there is none, but go with me on this for a minute because I'm trying to keep it simple. You guys probably just inserted stupid there, that's fine. Okay, so you've got some people who think in an either-or fashion. It's male or female, it's gay or straight, it's conservative or liberal, and then you've got other people who think in more of a both-and fashion. So they think, why can't I have attributes of both? Why can't I be a little bit feminine and a little bit masculine? Why can't I on some days be straight, quote straight, while on other days be, quote, gay? And so they're allowing themselves to sort of experience more than just what's supposed to be allowed, more than just what fits inside of this dualism. And those people are embracers of both and. They try to create a space in their own life where the dueling dualisms of Western thought that sort of hang over our head are just kind of pushed back a little bit so that they can begin to think, what would it mean for me to experience more than this, the both and rather than the either or. So she starts there, and that, knowing that, understanding that idea that the both and the either or, that life isn't really divided into either or choices for the individual. It's divided into either or choices for the masses, and that is so it can be simplified. But when you actually work your way down to the individual, there are a myriad number of choices that you have, and your natural desire is to simplify that. So maybe one way that we can start to see Fausto-Sterling's book is to see it as a book that necessarily complicates this either-or mentality that we've been having as a Western society. She's going to, throughout the course of the book, she's going to point to the ways that this either-or mentality has really limited what we're capable of understanding as a society, because we go into scientific studies with this either-or mentality in mind, and that constricts what we're allowed to think. And then we go into relationships with this either-or mentality in mind. The most amazing one, the most overlooked one, is monogamy. For example, if you think of monogamy as an either-or, you see that when you, let's say you're going to go out and meet your heterosexual man of your dreams, right, ladies, or the woman of your dreams, right, men? You're going to go out and meet this person, and if you decide to marry that person in the religious tradition, you've got to give up having sex with all the other people, give up having emotional, intimate relationships with all these other people. Now it's kind of a really traditional model of marriage that I'm describing here. I understand there are open marriages that ascribe to a much broader concept of marriage, but let's stick with just the traditional for now, because that's kind of what we're trying to explode here. And being from southeastern Kentucky, you see the traditional model a lot. So that either-or mentality says, if I marry this person, it's either him or someone else. But it's only one person at a time, definitely, and should be only one person forever. So that's the most obvious and overt way that we don't even look at anymore. We just take it for granted. Of course, there's one true person for me out there, but monogamy is sort of the stereotypical either-or decision, when in truth, humans from societies all over the world and all throughout history have embraced a both-and mentality in marriage, just as they have in gender and sexuality. So I'm running out of time on this video, like I said, as I ramble, so I'll start another one and talk a little bit more in depth about chapter 1.